Welcome to the Life You Love podcast. We're your hosts, Grace Lemire and Erin Convertini. This podcast is for the dreamers and the doers, for the women who want to create a life they genuinely love waking up to. We believe that life's short, so let's build one we love. Q2 is the perfect time to check in and reset because you still have time to course correct for the rest of the year. So we are only 3 months in. So we wanted to take today's episode to just kind of go over a Q2 reset, how we are resetting, and just cover some mindset stuff too, because I think this is a point in the year where people can start to be like, oh, Q1 didn't go as I really wanted it to, and now you feel defeated. But we kind of want to reframe that to be like, look, Q2 is about just looking at what you did in Q1, using all that information and reflection as data points to kind of course correct and pivot in Q2. So that's what today's episode is going to be all about. I'm excited for this episode because we were talking before we got on here about how Grace and I have not done our Q2 resets yet and how we're not feeling very like Q2 reset-y is actually what I called, which is definitely not the official term. But I know for me personally, and this is actually some of what I have in like my notes here, Q1 and like the New Year's resolution time period is always such a productive time for me. I always get like such a big spurt of energy, but then I kind of like slow down and come down from that in Q2, as do like everybody. I feel like everyone gets the New Year's energy, but if you do kind of take a step back and be like think of your year in quarters almost, that's a big theme of what we're going to be talking about in today's episode. Thinking of your year in quarters, you kind of allow yourself to have that like productive New Year's energy 4 times throughout the year and just do like one big reset and set your intentions for the next quarter. Absolutely. I am in the process right now of reading a book called The 12-Week Year, which is kind of that. It's basically that concept, and it's to take each quarter and treat it like it's its own year. And you can definitely read the book for sure. I think there is also an audiobook maybe on Spotify if you have Spotify Premium. And you can also ask AI for an extended synopsis and it will kind of give you a breakdown if you don't want to read the whole book. But I think it's a good way to kind of think about each quarter as its own little year and use the beginning of each quarter as your time to reset and reflect and realign and then create your plan. So with that, that's kind of where we feel like a Q2 reset should start, is like doing a physical reset to kind of get yourself back to like, okay, where am I at? And really to assess where you're at right now. Yeah, I always start, it's obviously called a Q2 reset, but I always start with the reset portion before going into like the goal setting and all of the other things that we're going to talk about. The purpose of this is just getting yourself back to a good base. I know for me, I can't focus when things are a disaster and everything becomes a disaster in a 3-month time period. Like I know for me personally, since I haven't done my Q2 reset, my Notion planner is such a disaster right now. Like my Same. Notion planner is where I keep all of my to-do lists and my content ideas and my work tasks and my projects. It is such a mess. It's actually stressing me out so bad. I was trying to look for a video script this morning and I literally couldn't. There were 5 different Notion pages that I checked and I could not find it. It's just like take a step back and reset all of that and like organize your digital space. But then I also do this physically and financially as well. So just take like one Saturday coming up and clean your apartment, do the spring cleaning, reset digitally, get a good system down for whatever planner you use digitally, and then financially just take a second to clean up your budget and your financial accounts and things like that. Just get yourself to a good base before you try to make any goals for moving forward. I agree 100%, especially when it comes to the physical space thing, because this past weekend I took a day to just kind of reset my space, organize a few things, move a couple pieces of furniture around that I wanted to, and just like do a deep clean. And afterwards, I feel like the mental clarity I had was so good. I feel like for some people, the physical environment doesn't impact their mental that much, but for me, it has a big weight. And so I think once you've done that, you can have more clarity around, reflecting and assessing. And I think this is a good time too to look at what your vision was at the beginning of the year and if it's changed. So then when you're reflecting on Q1 and being like, okay, what were my Q1 goals based on that vision? Did I make progress toward those goals? Why or why not? Then you can kind of think, okay, is it my vision that, needs to shift? Is it, that my follow through, I need to be more disciplined. I need to follow through more. I need to, you know what I mean? You can kind of pivot to where you need to be. And I think one note on that is you have to be really honest with yourself, I think, about what went well in Q1 versus what didn't. And I always kind of say this, you're the only one that has to know. Like nobody has to know like where you excelled, where you fell short, what didn't work, what goals you're scrapping, which ones you're like, just pivoting, nobody has to know any of that. You can just like reflect for yourself and then use that as like your sounding board or your base to be like, where do I want to go in Q?
Totally agree. I did do the physical space reset part of this. I did that last weekend after traveling for a couple of weeks. I was like, I just need to like reset my space physically to go into a productive work week. So I kind of did the like physical reset part of this. And it was funny what you just said about like the kind of vision stuff. When I was cleaning, I was cleaning off this kind of like desk nook in my living space. And that desk nook is where I keep my vision board that I made at the beginning of the year. But there was so much clutter on it for the last couple of weeks that I like couldn't see my vision board. And when I cleaned up my space, I saw my vision board and I was like, it came at the perfect time because I was kind of like morale was honestly really low this weekend. I was like, screw all of my goals. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to, this month, I'm not going to get anything done. And then I saw my vision board and I had like really big goals on there. And I was like, oh, okay. Like you're being dramatic. Let's just like clean your space and take it one step at a time too. Like if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're like, oh my gosh, the thought of cleaning up my space, getting a digital planner, resetting my budget, assessing my goals, setting goals. If that feels like very overwhelming to you, split this up over a period of like a couple of weeks to go into the second quarter, and like don't feel the need to do your assessment, like you said, and then also do the kind of like goal setting aspect all in one week.
I think a good mindset shift too, kind of related to what you were saying. And I know I mentioned this at the beginning, but this was a good mindset shift for me when it came to, because it can get really overwhelming when there's so much and you're like, my vision and this, that, and the other, and all these goals I had, and did I stay on track? Shift from looking at Q1 as like a pass fail situation and look at it in terms of recognizing patterns. So when you're reflecting back on the last 3 months, be like, okay, what patterns am I noticing, good or bad? Or not even using good or bad, but which patterns were constructive towards my growth and which ones were destructive towards my growth. And how can I use that with the mindset of collecting data that I can then use to better inform my decision making in Q2? For example, for me, I've noticed in Q1, I've done really well with my night routine. I feel like I have a solid routine. I'm still playing around with what exact time to start it versus like, when I want to go to bed, because my morning routine, I haven't done very well with. It's kind of been all over the place. I don't really have much of a routine and I'm trying to reestablish that. So I don't have to look at that as like good or bad. I can say my night routine was really constructive towards my goals of just like getting my life together and having more of like a flow in my life. My morning routine was kind of destructive towards my goals, right? Because it really isn't helping me get anywhere. But I don't have to look at that as, oh, well, I failed at my morning routine in Q1. So now I better get my act together in Q2, right? I can just look at it and be like, okay, what this tells me is that I don't maybe need to put as much focus on my night routine because it's kind of become habitual to me and I feel good about that. Where I do need to invest more time and energy and effort is into my morning routine, because like that should be my focus area, because it's not helping me get closer to my goals. And on that topic, one thing I started doing recently that I have really liked is starting to pay attention to my resources. So I focus on time, energy, money, and community. And I'll look at and try to figure out which ones I feel like are not doing well or are suffering, right? So if I'm coming up on friction all the time, there's an issue in my systems. And usually it's because my resources are not strong there. So if I, for example, am not doing well with my night routine, it's usually because, or if I'm going to bed too late, for example, it's usually because I'm short on time. So I'm either not starting it early enough, or I'm packing my day with way too much stuff that by the time I've eaten dinner and I'm home and whatever, I don't have enough time to do my night routine. Or if I am, let's say, like not keeping up with my space, is it an issue of there's something wrong in the system? Is it because I don't have enough time? How can I get more time, right? Can I pay someone to do something for me so that I get more time back in my schedule so I can clean my space? Or is it money, right? Like I can't afford to buy more mop heads or something, right? Or is it I can't, you know what I mean? Like trying to figure out what resources I feel like are not in abundance usually helps me figure out where friction in my systems could be.
Yeah, definitely. This is something that I actually do monthly. I do kind of like to do a monthly reset, and it's typically more on like the career side and like my business related goals rather than a lot of my life goals. I don't tend to do a monthly reset, but when I do my monthly reset, I'll be like, okay, where am I at right now? And then I'll go back 1 month and I'll say, where was I at a month ago? So kind of like the progress is the gap between those two. So then I'll look at the goals that I set at the beginning of the month and I'll be like, is my progress in line with the goals that I set at the beginning of the month? And I feel like doing this, the whole idea is to give yourself time to reflect on all of the things that went well, as opposed to just jumping ahead to setting new goals for the following month. Or the same applies for a quarterly reset as well, just setting goals for the new quarter. I feel like a lot of people do end up skipping over the kind of like progress they made in the past perspective. But like you said, it gives you so many data points on like, okay, where you made progress shows you where your focus has been for the past month or the past quarter. And that is like such powerful data because it shows you, I mean, obviously what you're focused on should be in line with what your goals are. And if there's a mismatch there, then there is a reason behind that. And I love like what you shared about the resources, because that is going to show you kind of like the root cause behind whether or not you are hitting your goals. I know for me in Q1, something that I have been reflecting on a lot is kind of like this lack of focus, or just like how many different things are my attention being like pulled into. And that was a big realization for me, was that I think I was like trying to do it all, and a lot of my Q1 goals were like me trying to do it all. And coming into Q2, I'm trying to set goals that are a lot more focused and just in line with like one or two focus areas. So I think that's a good tip too when you're going to set your Q2 goals. Just think about like, what are the one or two focus areas that you really want to hammer out in the next quarter, and stick to those and set goals that are strictly related to those. Because if you try to set goals in a ton of different areas of your life, your focus is going to be on a million different things and you're not going to end up making progress on any of them.
There was this video you reminded me as you were talking of this video I saw on social media. I wish I remember who said it because I could credit her, but it was basically she said something like, if someone were to follow you around for a week, how serious would they think you are about your goals based on what they see from you? And I was like, man, I don't think they would think I'm very serious right now. Like, I mean, there's been a lot going on in my life, I feel like the past few weeks, but so yeah, I don't think a lot of my goals have kind of gone out the window the last like few weeks, but I think it's a good way to think about it, really, of like how much time, energy, effort are you investing into these things. And I completely agree. I think picking, one, two, or three focuses is far more impactful, and just focus on making progress rather than trying to do it all. Because you've said this before in a podcast episode that like, episode my goodness, if you've said it before, that diluted focus creates diluted results. And I always think about that because it is really true. Like, you can try to do the most at the same time and then make teeny tiny bits of progress on all of them, or you can focus on one. And that's what I prefer to do, focus on a couple at a time and then make major progress on that thing, get it to a point where you really don't even have to focus on it anymore, because it's just become kind of like your default to do whatever that thing is, or to be whatever, that method is or whatever, and then go from there. I think the next step after you've figured out, you've kind of taken time to reflect on Q1, is to figure out where you want to go. Like, where are you trying to go in Q2? I'm a visual person. So sometimes when I try to sit down and I'm like, okay, where do I want to go? I'm like, I don't know. Sometimes it's really hard. And so I always tell people to do a vision meditation. You can just go on YouTube and type in like vision meditation. There will be a bunch that come up, and it basically is just a meditation that walks you through, like, it'll give you prompts to think about certain things, think about your dream day in the life or your dream career or whatever. And I find that to be so beneficial in terms of resetting my vision. And sometimes it will be the same, let's say you did one in January. Sometimes, your vision might be the same when you do it again in March, or it could have changed. And that gives you time to then kind of course correct and realign, but also to get a better vision of where you want to go in Q2.
Yeah, definitely. I don't do a ton of like sitting down and meditating and doing like the vision meditations. But one thing that I do for my quarterly resets, and we talked about this in our New Year's episode, but like I said, I did a vision board, like a physical vision board for my kind of annual vision board. But then I also have a digital vision board that I use as my computer home screen and the background of my Notion planner. And that's a quarterly vision board. So like in Q2, I'm going to go back into my Canva where I like made the vision board, and I'm going to update all of the photos. And I really love doing this on a quarterly basis because it does force you to get really granular about, there's probably, I don't know, 30 photos on there, and they all have to be reflective of that one specific quarter. So it forces you to get very granular on like what you want to focus on for that quarter. So for example, in like I'm literally looking at it right now on my computer, in Q1 I had a lot of photos on there of kind of like business planning and like a lot of behind the scenes computer admin work on the business side, because that's what I was focused on. But one of my big takeaways from Q1 is that I think I spent a little bit too much time on all of that, and I found myself really wrapped up in the whole like, okay, I'm going to trick myself into thinking that I'm busy and being productive by just like planning, but
Mm.
not like I'm avoiding the actual execution, needle moving tasks that I need to do in order to make progress on my goals. Which, if you find yourself doing that, definitely get out of that because I spent
Hmm.
way too much time on that in Q1. So in Q2, my vision board is going to be very reflective of me, like actually sitting down to film videos, actually sitting down to create the product that I want to launch, actually like, actually executing on my ideas, because in Q1, I think I got a little too planner girly.
Yeah. I This is such a good reminder for me because when I right around the new year, I was in moving mode and I also went on a work trip the week before I moved in mid-January. So the first 2 weeks of the year when everyone was in like major New Year's mode, I really wasn't, and so I never updated my vision board. I have had the same home screen on my computer, which is my vision board, since like January of 2024 and I still haven't updated it simply because I just haven't it has not been a priority. I've had other things that have just taken my time, but it should be a priority because I'm looking at it every single day of my life. And I probably should honestly print it out. And I have the same like built in desk nook thing in my apartment that yours does. And I feel like that would be a really cute area to kind of display my vision board and put it up. But I think this is also a good time to kind of audit your life too. And I mean, we talked about like assessing where you are, but asking yourself questions about each area of your life in terms of where you want to go. Like if you're like, I'm not happy in my career and I want to change it or whatever, what about it? Like, do you want to be learning new things? Are you like trying to get more feedback from people when it comes to your finances? Look at your spending patterns, or what's your goal? Are you trying to save more? Are you trying to invest more? Like, or do you just have like a bigger end goal? Like, let's say your end goal is by the end of this year, I want to have $10,000 saved or whatever. So in this quarter, I'm going to focus on getting a side hustle and making at least $250 extra per week and saving that money. It just goes straight to savings, like whatever it may be, trying to look at these different aspects of your life and figure out where do I want to go? And then what should I focus on in this quarter specifically? And then I think it just comes down to creating your plan to actually get there. Like, how are you actually going to execute? And I will say, in the book, The 12-Week Year, I think a lot of people should read it because even if you decide not to do a 12-week year, there's been a lot of, I mean, I've highlighted the heck out of the book. There's just so many good practical takeaways and mindset shifts and things. But the execution part, I think, is where I struggle. Like, if I come up with a plan, I have a hard time following that plan to a T, even if I put so much thought into that plan of like, this is why this plan will work and I need to just stick to it. If I don't start seeing results, like, pretty soon after I start doing it, I'm like, forget the plan, scrap it. No, I just need to follow my heart. Like, I'm not gonna, whatever. But this quarter, I really am trying to, especially with business, develop a plan and stick to it. Because if at the end of 3 months, nothing has happened, great. We're not doing the plan ever again. But if I see results, you know what I mean? Then we'll change the plan, right? But you have to give it long enough to see any sort of result. And it's just like, this is with anything, you know what I mean? You take a new supplement, it's not going to work overnight. Or if you start going to the gym, you're not going to see muscle definition after one workout. Or in a relationship, you might not, you're not going to be so like deeply connected and in love after one date necessarily, right? Friendships take time. Everything takes time to build. So when you're coming up with a plan, you have to give yourself time to execute it. And I know in the 12-week year, it talks about kind of choosing like 2 to 3 focus areas and then coming up with different, like week over week, you're sitting down like every Monday morning or something, be like, okay, this is what I'm doing this week. And it's not based on necessarily what you want to do, but it's based on like, how am I going to execute this plan? That is, yeah, I need to improve there. That's like
Yeah.
one of my focus areas is follow
I
the
have a
plan.
million things to say on this topic because this is something that I struggle with too, but I'm also reading a book right now, which gave me a lot of valuable insight on this topic. So the first thing that I want to say is this book that I'm reading is called Diary of a CEO, which he also has a podcast, which is really good. So definitely go check
Hmm.
out. He interviews like a lot of really good guests on that podcast, and it's very like businessy. I'm reading his book right now, and in one of the chapters, he is talking about the discipline equation. And
Mhm.
basically, discipline, like the definition of it is showing up consistently without motivation. So, your motivation, like when you're really excited about something, it's very easy to execute. But what happens when that excitement goes away? That's where discipline comes in. It allows you to show up consistently when that motivation goes away. And he talks about this discipline equation as the perceived value of the result of the discipline minus the cost of physically doing it. And I really like the way that he broke that down. So, the perceived value. So, what are you going to get out of it if you are disciplined and you execute on your goals and you show up consistently? What are you going to get out of it? And then the perceived cost is, what does it cost you to go after it? Is it opportunity cost of not doing something else? Is it, if you have the goal to go to the gym, it's the hour that you have to spend in the gym, it's the hard work that you're going to have to put in, it's whatever it may be. And he was kind of talking about it in the chapter of the book as like, when you are deciding whether or not to go after your goals and whether or not to execute on your goals, think about this equation and say, okay, am I focusing way too much on the costs and not enough on the value? Do I not have a strong enough value? So, is my why not strong enough? And I really need to think through why I want to go after this goal to begin with. So I thought that was like I've actually like done this a couple of times in a few of my decision making things, and it just kind of like grounds you and be like, okay, I don't need to focus on like the cost of this being too high. I should be focusing on the value of this and why I'm going to get way more value than the cost of me going to the gym for an hour. And then the second thing is because he kind of talks about it as in like, you don't need another time management technique, you just need more discipline kind of thing. But I actually do have a couple of things that like really, really help on the time management aspect because, like I said, I fall into the trap of like sitting there planning all day and never actually executing. And like, that's a complete waste of time. Like, I don't need to plan the same thing 10 times over. I just need to execute on the one idea I already have. Very clearly define your planning times versus your execution times. And I think this is especially true if you're trying to do anything entrepreneurial where you are in charge of all of the strategy behind what's going on as well, because that's when I think we fall into a lot of these kind of like planning times where we can't get out of that planner track and you just sit there and make 10 different to-do lists and you never actually check them off, because you do have to be like the strategic arm of your business as well. But what I mean by saying clearly define your planning versus your execution times, for me, I like to think of it as normal business hours are execution times and anything outside of that is planning time. So after the hour of 5 p.m., that's when I'm sitting there in my Notion planner making my to-do list for the next day and planning out what I need to execute. On a weekend when I'm walking on the treadmill at the gym listening to a podcast and I'm feeling really inspired, that's when I'm like planning what I need to do next month in order to hit my goal. Like kind of those off weird times when you're just sort of thinking abstractly, but then very clearly have your execution times where you're like, I'm not going to spend 9 a.m. on a Monday sitting in my Notion planner making a to-do list. Like that's a waste of my time. I need to be executing during those times. So whatever those times look like for you, it doesn't matter, but just clearly define them and don't mix the two.
It reminds me too, as you're talking about this, because this is, you're kind of creating a system for yourself to follow through. And I don't remember where this quote comes from. Maybe it's Atomic Habits or something, but it basically says like, you don't rise to the level of your motivation, you fall to the level of your systems or something like that. And I think that is such a good way to think about it because, again, going back to the mindset portion of this episode, you don't have to view any of these things as failures or as like you not making, you failed, you didn't make enough progress. It's like maybe your systems are just not there, because if you do care about the vision and the goal, but you're having a hard time executing, it might not be that it's not that you're not cut out for it or something like that, right? It's probably just that you don't have the proper systems in place. And it's really just about trial and error, coming up with a system that feels good to you so that when you are not motivated, you fall to the level of your system and you still end up being disciplined. And I think that's probably going to be one of my focus areas in Q2, because I think I realized in Q1 that my systems were really not as solid as I thought, because when I wasn't motivated, then I wasn't following through. And that's obviously not good, right? Like I want to be making progress towards things, especially when it comes to business. I have a hard time showing up consistently, like on my socials, just like creating content every single day. And I think it's because my system doesn't feel solid. Like my Notion is somewhat organized, but also a little bit all over the place. And my Notion calendar that I use to manage everything probably could be stronger, or I could use some different format that feels better to me, because the way I have it now is just not really working. Like there's something about it that's not like, that is a system that's not really helping
I
me.
will say too with that, I think that's a little bit of a double-edged sword too, because I always catch myself saying things like that and being like, I need to spend time getting my systems down and I need to spend time making sure my content calendar is better. I mean, we're just using content as an example here, but whatever it is, whatever you're working toward, like you can always find a way to kind of like stay in planning and systems mode. When I catch myself, I know like I catch myself a lot being like, well, I would rather stay at my kitchen island sitting there fixing my content calendar to avoid moving over to my like in front of my window and actually sitting down and filming a video. And it's like I kind of delay that process intentionally because I'm delaying doing the thing that's a little bit uncomfortable, because even though I've been creating content for years, it still is uncomfortable to like sit in front of the camera and talk and show up every single day. So I kind of stay in planning mode longer than I need to because it's more comfortable and it helps me like I catch myself being like, I would love to have more things to plan because then I don't have to go execute. And then so that's a little bit of a double-edged sword too. And I'm trying to get myself out of that and just being like one common theme for me moving into Q2 is you don't need another idea. You just need to execute on the one idea you have. Like I shouldn't have a list of 10 video ideas to film. I should have a list of one, maybe
Girl, I have
two.
like 100 and there's
Exactly.
no reason for it. Like, why do I
Yes.
have a
And they're
Notion
all over the
table of 100 ideas and they've got
yes.
tags and everything? I think it goes back to this idea. I'm like full of quotes today, apparently, but I love this quote. This is action creates clarity faster than thinking ever will. And I think you have to find this balance between thinking about where you want to go and planning for where you want to go and making a plan and whatever to just executing. And I think sometimes I'll time it. I'll be like, you have 1 hour to sit here and fiddle with whatever and make a plan or whatever. And then at that point, when the hour is up, the timer goes off, we're going into execution. And that's been helpful. I also, Erin's probably going to laugh because I have been mentioning this so many times to her over the past couple days, even like sending voice notes about podcast stuff. Guys, I just discovered Claude, like AI, and I like tried with ChatGPT. I just like couldn't. I felt like it always sounded so stupid when it would like say things back to me and I just gave up. But I tried Claude last week and like, I am like, I mean, I'm not like the number one fan because I'm sure there's someone who's like up Claude's booty, like even more than me, but I have been using it all of the time. It is so good for helping you come up with like a plan. Like if you're like, I just need to like create something and get this going faster and not stay in planning mode 24/7. It's really good. And I also want to try it. I'm finishing up reading the 12-week year this week. And then when we're filming this, it's right before April. So I want to finish reading the book and then take all of the stuff that I've learned and whatever and have it create a 12-week plan for me based on what my goals are. And I think that's also a really good way to not end up in planning mode 24/7 and just get yourself into execution. But yeah, you definitely have to find a balance for sure.
Yeah, I also love AI. I feel like I go through phases with it where I like remember to use it and then I fall off of it. And I've been using it pretty consistently for the last 6 or so months. And that's something that I did was like using it as my project manager. And it is so beneficial for this. Basically, what I did the last time I had a really long drive, I was like in major planning mode. I was just really in my head. And I recorded a bunch of voice memos and uploaded them into AI and said, hey, can you write me like I said I wanted to launch by June. Can you write me a project roadmap to be able to execute by June? And obviously it had a lot of context because my voice memo was like 20 minutes long.
No,
I
it's
was
so
just
smart.
rambling. Yeah, I was just like rambling about like all of my ideas and like getting them from my head and like verbalizing them. And then I said, write me a project roadmap. And then I knew exactly what I needed to focus on for the next 3 to 4 months to be able to launch by like the intended time period. So yeah, definitely use AI to kind of get you out of that, like, because like you said, you're just in your head and then you're going to get so much clarity when you do start to execute. Like again, using content as an example, if you have 1 or 2 ideas and then you go execute on them, chances are you're going to get 1 or 2 comments on those videos and those comments are going to give you the idea for the next video. And then you're going to get 4 comments on that video and then those comments are going to give you the idea for the next video. So executing does get you a lot more to your like end result than you think it will. You don't need to stay in planning mode.
Absolutely. Even just day to day stuff. I've thought a lot about my home space here. Just now that I'm in a new space, I moved 2 months ago and I'm trying to reset and be like, okay, what routines work for me and all of that. And I remember I was like, well, I don't really know, what my perfect routine looks like. Well, guess what, girl? Not doing a dang thing about it is not going to get you any closer to knowing what your perfect routine is. One night I tried a different morning routine. I was like, okay, I like this, but it's not going to work on a day to day basis because I'm usually up later than the time I went to bed the night before. So we're going to shift that back. I've been experimenting with night routines and trying like a couple different ones and being like, okay, now I feel like I've got it down. Just like, you know what I mean? Just stuff like that. You'll get so much more clarity if you just take action. And also, don't be afraid to take messy action. Like it doesn't need to be perfect. You didn't fail if you have a goal to like exercise more in Q2. You don't fail if you don't exercise every day. Or you know what I mean? It's did you do more than what you did at the beginning? And that's why I don't set a lot of numeric goals. And I said this in a video on my page, and people were like kind of intrigued by the idea that I don't set numeric goals. But like I'm not gonna say like, okay, I have to work out 5 times a week or I fail. What does that do for me if I have a week where I'm sick and I don't work out one of the days? Because I'm sorry, if I'm sick or if I'm on my period and I'm like really cramping, because y'all know I get extremely severe periods, I'm not going to be like, well, like, in the fetal position, like I'm just going to hobble outside and go for a walk. No, like that works for some people, that extreme discipline. I'm not doing it. Like I'm going to honor what my body needs in that moment, but I orient around more. Like if I want to have a cleaner space, at the end of Q2, am I going to sit there and be like, okay, yeah, I maintained a cleaner space? Because you know the answers to those questions, whether you know the exact number of days you cleaned or not. If you're like, I want to exercise more, did you exercise more than you did in Q1? If you're like, I want to hang out with my friends more, that's something that I'm trying to do, prioritize community more, getting out and being around other young people. Did I do that more or not? It's not a pass fail thing. It's just am I making progress and getting myself closer to my goals?
100%. And we are running out of time here, but I feel like this is the perfect way to kind of wrap up this episode because this is something that has given me so much peace over the last kind of like, I would say the last 2 quarters. I actually heard this on a Mel Robbins podcast episode where she was talking about how just kind of like the reminder that not all areas of your life need to be a focus at all time. And it's actually a lot more productive to think of your life in seasons, just like this, like the physical weather seasons change. She said progress is about calculated periods of imbalance. We always like kind of strive for this idea of balance in all areas of our life, but the way that she phrased it was almost like if you're striving for balance in every single area of your life at all times, they're actually going to contradict each other and you're not going to make any progress because like we said, diluted focus gets diluted results. So it's actually a lot more beneficial for you to focus on 1 to 2 areas of your life for a quarter and say, okay, this quarter, this season of my life, I'm really focused on my health and fitness. And yeah, maybe my career progression takes a little bit of a back burner this quarter, but then the next quarter, maybe it's the complete opposite. And my career is what's first. And some of my social obligations take a back burner. Like it doesn't have to be all at once. And if your health and fitness isn't a major priority for you in Q2, or if your career isn't a major focus for you in Q2, that's okay. Just set 1 or 2 focus areas and you'll probably make a lot more progress toward your goals that way. But with that, I think we can wrap up this week's episode. Thanks for tuning into the Life You Love podcast. If you have any questions or any other episodes you want us to film in the coming weeks, definitely let us know. You can leave them in Spotify or you can DM us at the Life You Love Pod on Instagram. Thanks for tuning into the podcast and until next week.